Atomfall scheduled for release on March 27th, 2025, and it's going to be available on pretty much everything but the Switch. Notably, it's also accessible to Xbox Game Pass subscribers on launch day. Atomfall is a survival action game from Rebellion Development set in a British post-apocalyptic wonderland, or wasteland, I guess it depends on which side you draw your entertainment from. Drawing its own inspiration from the real-life 1957 wind-scale nuclear incident, the game reimagines that event, plunging players into a quarantined North England teeming with mystery and danger, and sets you out on your own. 5 years after everything went straight to hell, Atomfall tosses you into the middle of a radioactive nightmare from England's Lake District. And it's not the peaceful countryside you might find on a friggin' postcard. It's a full-blown quarantine zone, crawling with bad guys, danger, and some radiation. You wake up with no idea what's going on. It's a mess. You have no memory, no clue who you are, and the only way forward is to figure out what the hell happened and why you're actually there. Speaking of why you're there, go check out the ACG podcast channel at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be talking more about this game, diving even deeper than this actual video does. The game isn't necessarily post-apocalyptic in a world sense, but that's like saying that you don't care that someone else's house burned down just because yours is still there. And what matters is you're here now. You have to go through Atomfall's world, which is set roughly between 1950, but possibly before 2099, because you have old-ass guns, but then you have a robot careening through town telling everybody to watch their shit or I'll push it back in for them. It's a unique combination for a first-person shooter survival game, and does it work? Well, in the preview, I would say yes and sometimes no. I got to spend 3 hours with the game, exploring, fighting, sneaking, streaking, and stabbing my way through a countryside. Let's see how it did, and to keep seeing how things are, please do hit subscribe. This video is brought to you by our new sponsor, absolutely nobody. First up, and even from the moment on, I jumped into Atomfall with the idea that this might be something that I'd played before, or at least in some ways like a lot of other survival games. And that did met out quite quickly, constantly jostling different items, different equipment, with a heavy restriction on inventory, as well as a heightened sense of danger in the game versus your typical Fallout game, but definitely less so than, say, Tarkov. Now, I'm not saying that every single time you dip your nuts into some creek water, you're going to end up coming out with something, but you do have to watch various elements, such as bleeding on some of the weapons and a heart rate meter that plays out a lot like a stamina meter in games that are based on that. As I made my way through the brand new location I was dropped into, imagine a semi-open world hub-based kind of title, where you go into particular locations and they might be quite vast, but they all do remind you a great deal of Sniper Elite and the titles in the Sniper Elite series, meaning when you go out, some of the areas are large and open and wide, and then others funnel you through discrete linear locations. For example, subways, a particular castle, a village, underground tunnels, somebody's cellar. You sneak in behind somebody's back to squeeze through a gap to get past them, or sneak up behind them to kill them. The first thing to discuss is the quest system. They don't call it quests, they call it leads. Leads move you around the world, sometimes subtly like a whisper in the dark alley, other times like a 5-year-old's friggin' Christmas list after binge-watching infomercials, meaning completely chaotic and almost borderline incomprehensible, and I actually sort of dug that. Somehow, you end up trying to find the right direction by reading different information that you get within the game world, without an exact quest checkbox list. They push you toward hints, and hints push you towards new quest locations, lost people, or in some cases, gloriously frustrating dead ends. Now, some people might bounce off the idea of this cryptic breadcrumb kind of guiding you through a journey. Nevertheless, for me, I liked it. There's something satisfying about piecing together half-heard conversations, scribbled notes, and the occasional gut feeling while scanning the overworld and trying to make sense of what you think you might need to do next by looking at your notes. And most of these you've found because they're torn up papers. Apparently in Atomfall, nobody respects books. It's like every citizen went full madman conspiracy theorists, ripping pages out of books, rewriting their journals in the margins, or just straight up confessing illegal deeds on loose scraps of paper, then leaving them all over the place. Mercifully, the bad guys seem to have collective amnesia about the existence of the friggin' written language, so those notes remain untouched, just waiting for you to stumble on them, in the open, on a desk, stuck to a wall with a knife, whatever. And as you go through the areas, you listen to people, you grab these, you consistently try to complete each particular lead to its end. Take this for example. I found an old voice recording from someone who's in a downed helicopter when something major went wrong. The recording hints that they may have traveled to a nearby village, so I decided to gear up and head towards that village. But along the way, I came across a torn up note in a burned out shack something scribbled in what looked like desperation, maybe a mention of stopping for the night. And just like that, the game reinforced the idea that I was probably on the right track. The more of those pieces I found and gathered, the more tangible the trail became, almost like you're building a case file in a way, a detective chasing ghosts that are actually people who might be dead through the ruins, across the plains, through an enemy base, and then you stop right in the middle, turn around, and think to yourself, how in the fuck did that old lady from a helicopter crash who was hurt get through all of this same shit? Then you shrug and decide, who cares, and continue on with the game. Atomfall's ride is one that you just sort of know you bought the ticket for, and it's okay, even though slightly weird at times. It's a system that makes you feel like you're always uncovering a little bit of story rather than just following a glowing waypoint, and that, to me, makes sense. Now, during my time through the game, though, I didn't really run into that issue, at least too much, not in a way that felt frustrating. A lot of the objectives also played out in a familiar way. Help someone in need, track down a missing person, chase after a cryptic clue. They all did feel grounded in that setting, though. Take the case of the helicopter passenger I mentioned earlier. That threat alone felt like it could spiral into something quite big and rather unexpected. And that's the hook of Atomfall. You never quite know which story beats will fully unravel. Regardless of this, or because of this, you're going to find yourself going through open areas, going through linear locations, and a good deal of the time you're going to be sneaking around and trying to keep yourself safe. This can be done in many different ways, including situations that I find to be quite intriguing in how they play out, like threatening somebody with a gun, and they don't know if there's any bullets in it, and you might get an enemy to run off. So if you meet up with somebody, you have a gun, and they don't, there's a chance that you could send them running. I think that's awesome. That possibility there to have a little bit more of a gray area interaction is awesome. You can also go in and do combat, or you can sneak. Now, stealth itself was pretty basic, with you sneaking around in one of two ways, crouched or just walking slowly. There was also the ability for you to crawl under particular areas like a broken fence or beneath a bookshelf, but it was contextual to those places, so don't assume you're going to be going full prone like a sniper game. The sneaking really didn't have a lot of indicators of level, simply telling if you were hidden or not, and that might be something that as I continue to play we get more of, or discover more of. Sneaking around also allows for you to get up behind an enemy and take them out. Or I could have just walked past them. The ability to have some social stealth is also here. For example, when you go into a village, everybody allowed me inside as long as I didn't cause any problems. As I walk past, people, particularly guards, will say things like, I don't know if I trust you, and keep an eye on you more than others. And as long as you have your weapons put away, you're pretty much in no problem. If you pull the weapons out, everybody doesn't instantly attack you in most places, but you instantly become the focus of everybody's attention. And sneaking also comes into play when you're trespassing in the game. For example, particular factions own some of the places, so you might go into a spot and you're completely fine, and then you might enter a secondary location and immediately you get warned that you're trespassing, and usually you see a glyph on a wall or something like that. When you're trespassing, they're on you pretty much in a second, so you have to be very careful. Speaking of the AI, when you were sneaking, it was fine. It wasn't great. It didn't really flank too much in combat either. It was a pretty good shot, I would say. Far away enough that it could hit me if I was standing out in the open despite the difficulty I was on. When it came to sneaking, it noticed me most of the time if I was out and about, but when you're in those places where it marks you as hidden, you truly are. But as you move around, you're able to put different weapons in and out of a hot equipped section, as well as your inventory. Being able to switch between those didn't take very long, so if you want to go bow and arrow to a shotgun to a rifle to a pistol and back and forth, I certainly wouldn't call your character quick or slick, but it works pretty well. Enemies also did run and hide in some fights near locations where they had the ability to go to cover. Ferals, though, these are radioactive creatures that you have to take down quickly or they can poison you. Attack with the damn quickness. They do not care about anything, and they'll just run straight towards you and hit you, and if they do enough times, you get poisoned, so you have to watch out for some of the creatures in the game. Atomfall also rounds out the combination of stealth and gunplay and social interaction and skills with a basic crafting system. Grenades, Molotov cocktails, bandages to stop bleeding, and so on. It's bog standard stuff for survival games, with each item progressively doing more. For instance, a food item heals a small amount of damage over time, a bandage heals more and also stops bleeding, and a med kit is a one-stop shop back to Hero Land. The game doesn't really have an ownership system that I could find outside of the aforementioned trespassing you're in deep shit system, so if there's a reason for you to pick something up, you probably should. Well, I didn't get to see the full game. I did get to see how the graphics look, at least in these parts. And graphically, there is no denying the game absolutely looks like Sniper Elite. It's got the same sort of off-kilter filtering effect that can go on. And in particular, the texture work and the locations had something that was very familiar. So imagine a mix of Fallout and Sniper Elite, and you're halfway there. However, there's no over-the-top flashy bullet vision in this game or anything like that. Takedowns themselves are fairly basic. You're not a character out there doing Krav Maga. You're just out there actually trying to survive. Taking a cricket bat to a dude's face doesn't require deafness, it requires death. There were also some issues, just basic, that I saw here and there with some performance. But the world itself was interesting to move around with. It had a lot of mystique to it as well. A little bit Doctor Who, a little bit Fallout, and I like just the general feel. I also liked the robot design, but I've always been a fan of this timeline and these ideas of robot design in those games, and I was playing on the PC. The sound work is also decent, with environmental sound like a creek running by or the wind blowing through some rafters to get the feel of the environment and solidify it. If there's one thing that Atomfall absolutely nails, though, it is the voice. Not just in terms of performance, though the voice actors absolutely deliver, but in how they inject life into the game's eerie post-apocalyptic setting. One particular character stood out for me, one of the first ones I met, which is basically imagining Harry Potter's Professor McGonagall if she were younger, possibly a little unhinged and carrying the kind of quiet menace that makes you wonder if helping her is a good idea or the biggest mistake you'll make. She gave me a quest, and our back and forth was surprisingly engaging for a game like this. The dialogue system doesn't just throw you into bland, emotionless choices either. Each response has a particular flavor beside it, a feeling attached to it. You can be things like cynical, scared, blunt, or just downright dismissive, and the NPCs react somewhat accordingly. One thing I did notice as I was playing, there's no real skill checks in any way connected to the dialogue. There's nothing about what equipment you have or anything. So the idea that you can just pick to be curious in the discussion really worked. The other thing I wanted to talk about is music. As you guys know, I love to listen to this stuff and sort of see how it builds in the game world. Atomfall's music intentionally lean, and that's a good thing. A game like this, steeped in that survivalism and the eerie quiet of isolation, would lose a lot if the atmosphere was consistently blasted out with music to you. It nails the feeling of solitude and a bit of creepy unease depending on what tracks are playing. So far with the preview, I can say this. If you're expecting a Fallout-style game, this is not it. The game doesn't have a bunch of attributes like you would expect in a title like that, and I'm totally okay with it. It is a bit clumsy, at least right now, but at the same time, switching between the larger areas, the village towns, going into a dam with questionable bad guys inside that are probably worshipping some kind of atomic eldritch beast that was sucking down nuclear pellets. I like the mystery there. The linear sections were very linear, but they were interesting to explore. It just depends on how it's all going to come together. It's certainly not a larger, expansive world, but the idea of doing the leads does help add mystery to a game that might feel a little one-note depending on exactly the kind of gamer that you are. Certainly people who've come off something that is heavy survival, like a Tarkov or something like that. Anyway, that's it for me. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up. If you didn't like it, still hit the thumbs up. Consider it your daily dose of irony. And hey, if you still want honest, no sponsor, no BS reviews and previews, head over to the Patreon. Your support keeps the whole thing running. Take care. Enjoy your week. I'll see you in the next one.